September 7th, 1101. The dust cloud approaching Ramla didn't just promise battle, it promised annihilation. 32,000 Fatimid soldiers, the largest Egyptian army since the First Crusade, marched behind General Saad al-Dawla, called the Sword of Cairo. Against them stood 260 knights and 900 infantry, the last meaningful force between Egypt's wrath and Jerusalem itself. The mathematics were simple and horrifying: 123 enemies for every defender, 1 crusader for every 123 infidels. Lose this battle, and the Holy City falls within weeks. Christianity's foothold in the Holy Land dies before it can truly take root. Win, and you achieve what military historians would call impossible for the next 1,000 years. By sunset that day, 5,000 enemy corpses would litter the plains, while the Sword of Cairo lay dead in blood-soaked sand. 80 Crusader knights would pay with their lives for this miracle. This wasn't fantasy or divine legend. This was the day King Baldwin I rewrote every rule of medieval warfare through steel, courage, and one desperate gamble that shouldn't have worked. You're about to witness how Baldwin achieved what chronicles call the impossible victory, and why the Fatimids, masters of desert warfare for centuries, never saw death approaching until too late. You'll discover the tactical secret that turned supposedly invincible Sudanese archers into helpless victims. You'll learn why Baldwin's own capital believed him dead while he stood victorious on the battlefield. And you'll see the 30-second decision that saved Christianity's presence in the Holy Land for nearly 2 more centuries. But here's what the chronicles hide beneath their pious language. How did Baldwin know exactly when to unleash his reserve? What made Fatimid armies victorious across North Africa so catastrophically vulnerable here? Why did the victors send desperate pleas for reinforcement after winning? How could losing 80 knights equal total triumph? The First Crusade had ended just 2 years before in 1199, leaving a fragile string of Christian states clinging to the Mediterranean coast like shipwreck survivors to driftwood. Jerusalem had fallen to Crusader forces in blood and fire, but holding it, that proved another matter entirely. The Crusader states were islands in an Islamic sea, perpetually starved of manpower, constantly besieged by enemies who could replace losses while Christians could not. Enter Baldwin, brother of the legendary Godfrey who'd conquered Jerusalem but ruled barely a year before death claimed him. Unlike his pious predecessor, who'd refused the title of king in the city where Christ wore a crown of thorns, Baldwin understood brutal reality. The kingdom of Jerusalem needed more than prayers and relics. It needed steel, strategy, and a king willing to gamble everything on a single afternoon's work. A veteran of countless desperate battles, Baldwin had fought his way from Edessa to Jerusalem, learning the harsh arithmetic of Crusader survival. You were always outnumbered, usually surrounded, perpetually one catastrophic defeat from complete annihilation. The Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt, one of the medieval world's great powers, had established an annual invasion cycle that ground away at Christian strength. Each year, as spring turned to summer's scorching heat, Egyptian armies would march north from Ascalon, that poisoned dagger pointed directly at Jerusalem's heart, attempting to reclaim what they'd lost to European invaders. Saad al-Dawla, the Sword of Cairo, commanded the 1101 expedition. A veteran general with victories carved across North Africa, he brought the Caliphate's absolute finest. 5,000 Sudanese archers renowned across the Islamic world for their deadly accuracy at 200 paces. 8,000 Berber light cavalry famous for speed that made them seem to fly across desert sand. 3,000 Arab heavy cavalry armored in the finest Damascus steel, carrying lances that had pierced Crusader mail from Spain to Syria. The Fatimids had learned from previous failed attempts against Jerusalem. This time they brought numbers that simply could not lose, or so mathematics promised. But the Kingdom of Jerusalem faced a manpower crisis that would define its entire desperate existence. Where Muslim rulers could summon vast populations from Egypt, Syria, and beyond, Baldwin commanded perhaps a few thousand knights and men-at-arms scattered across his fragile realm. Most were tied down garrisoning castles, guarding cities, protecting roads. When Ramla's garrison spotted that approaching dust cloud, Baldwin could scrape together just 260 knights and 900 infantry from Jerusalem's defenders. Every other soldier was committed elsewhere, unavailable, already stretched, impossibly thin. The mathematics were brutal beyond description. The geography, even worse. Ramla sat on open plains stretching for miles, perfect terrain for the Fatimid numerical advantage to crush any defense. The city controlled the coastal road from Egypt to Jerusalem. Lose it, and the kingdom's capital lay exposed, defenseless, doomed. Previous Fatimid attempts had failed due to poor timing, divided command, or Crusader luck. But 1101 would be different. The Egyptians had learned from their mistakes, refined their tactics, brought overwhelming force, or so they believed, with absolute certainty. The Fatimid army that assembled at Ascalon represented the Caliphate's military might in terrifying miniature. The Sudanese archer regiments formed the killing corps 5,000 professional soldiers, each carrying 60 arrows and trained to loose 10 shafts per minute. These weren't simple bowmen, but career warriors whose composite bows could punch through chainmail at 200 yards. Behind them, 8,000 Berber light cavalry waited on swift Arabian horses, carrying javelins and curved scimitars that could behead a man with a single stroke. The heavy cavalry, 3,000 Arab horsemen in mail armor carrying lances and Damascus swords, would deliver the final killing blow after archers broke Crusader formations. What Baldwin understood, and his enemies failed to grasp until too late, would save Jerusalem from reconquest. The Fatimid command structure possessed a fatal flaw: rigid hierarchy built on provincial governors and tribal chiefs, each jealous of their authority and prestige. The entire army flowed from Saad al-Dawla's personal command. Kill the head and the body might thrash, might panic, might die. The Crusader force seemed pathetic by any rational comparison. Those 260 knights each wore 70 pounds of chainmail, helmet, and padding beneath the scorching desert sun. Their war horses, brought from Europe at enormous expense or bred locally, stood hands taller than Arabian horses, carrying 300 pounds of armored knight and equipment. These weren't merely soldiers, but mobile fortresses trained from childhood for mounted shock combat. The 900 infantry included 400 spearmen to anchor defensive lines and 500 crossbowmen whose weapons could punch through mail armor at 100 yards with mechanical precision. Baldwin divided his pathetic force into 6 divisions, not from tactical brilliance, but brutal necessity. With so few men, he needed to make the battlefield appear fuller than it was, to create options where none existed. He kept the 6th Division, his best knights and personal household warriors, in reserve under his direct command. His commanders protested violently. "Commit everything to the battle line!" But Baldwin had learned something in a dozen desperate engagements where survival seemed impossible. The moment of crisis always came in every battle. When it arrived, 50 knights at the right place mattered infinitely more than 500 in the wrong position. The tactical geography favored the Egyptians so completely it seemed divine judgment against Christian presumption. The plains around Ramla stretched flat and featureless for miles in every direction. No forests to hide flanking forces, no hills to defend, no rivers to use as barriers. The morning sun would rise behind the Fatimid army, shining directly into Crusader eyes. The distance to Ascalon meant Baldwin couldn't prevent enemy concentration or catch them deploying. Every single advantage lay with Egypt. Every disadvantage crushed the Crusaders. On the night of September 6th, Crusader scouts galloped back with reports that froze blood. The enemy had camped just hours away, close enough that campfire smoke darkened the southern horizon. Baldwin faced the eternal commander's dilemma that has no good answer. Fight on catastrophically unfavorable ground, or retreat to Jerusalem's walls and let the enemy ravage the kingdom unopposed, destroying everything in their path. His war council split into bitter factions. Some urged immediate withdrawal to Jerusalem's fortifications where walls might offset numbers. Others demanded a night attack to catch Fatimids unprepared in their camps. Baldwin chose neither option. He would fight at dawn on the open plains, accepting every disadvantage, gambling everything on one desperate truth, that courage and steel at the decisive moment could defeat mathematics itself. His men spent the night in prayer and grim preparation. Priests heard confessions from knights who knew they'd likely die with the sun's rising. Warriors checked armor straps one final time, sharpened swords until edges could split hairs, made peace with God and death. The Fatimids, by contrast, celebrated their coming victory with songs and feasting. Why shouldn't they? The mathematics promised triumph. Dawn on September 7th, 1101, came like divine judgment to Ramla's plains. Crusader sentries saw it first, a brown smudge on the eastern horizon that grew and grew until it seemed to devour the sky itself. The earth trembled beneath 32,000 feet. Dust rose like smoke from a burning world. The Fatimid host had arrived to reclaim Jerusalem for Islam. Baldwin rode along his pathetically thin lines as the enemy deployed in terrible magnificence. 6 small divisions of knights and infantry, their banners hanging limp in the breathless morning air. Against them, the Egyptian army unfolded like some deadly flower of steel and flesh. Sudanese archers in the center, thousands upon thousands, their white robes brilliant in the rising sun. Cavalry on both flanks, light horse circling like predators, scenting blood, heavy cavalry waiting patiently for the moment to deliver death. Then Baldwin did something no rational general should ever do. Instead of commanding from safe distance, coordinating the battle through messengers, he placed himself with the 6th Division, the reserve that would decide everything. His lieutenants protested with genuine alarm. The king belonged in the rear, directing the overall battle. But Baldwin understood something about leadership that transcends tactics. Sometimes a crown must be risked to keep it. Sometimes a king must fight beside his men or lose their hearts forever. Saad al-Dawlah's deployment revealed Egyptian confidence bordering on contempt. His archers formed static lines protected by pavises, large shields creating a wooden wall. This was standard Islamic doctrine against cavalry, perfected over centuries of desert warfare. Let the foolish knights charge into arrow storms. Few would reach the defensive lines. Those who did would arrive exhausted, their horses blown and dying, easy prey for countercharging cavalry. It had worked from Spain to Syria, from North Africa to Persia. Why not here against these desperate Christians? The mathematics of war stopped making any sense when Gerard of Puiset led the 1st Division forward. 40 knights and 150 infantry charging against thousands. The Egyptian drums began a rhythm like some giant's heartbeat echoing across the plains. Then came the horn signals, and the sky turned black. 10,000 arrows darkening the sky wasn't poetic metaphor, but mechanical reality. Thousands of archers, each loosing every 6 seconds, created a continuous rain of death that fell like judgment itself. Gerard's charge disintegrated before it truly began. Arrows found every gap in armor, every exposed inch of horseflesh. The Lord of Puiset took 3 shafts through his mail, crying, "Jerusalem," before tumbling from his saddle. His body vanished under hooves as his men tried desperately to retreat. Of 40 knights, 12 made it back to friendly lines. The infantry simply ceased to exist, cut down like wheat before scythes. What happened next seems like madness, unless you understand Baldwin's desperate calculation. He sent the 2nd Division forward immediately, no pause to reconsider, no adaptation to enemy tactics that had just shattered his first attack. Another 40 knights threw themselves at the Egyptian center in what seemed like suicidal insanity. The result proved identical to the first slaughter. Arrows turned men and horses into pincushions. The Sudanese archers began singing victory songs in their native tongues, certain of triumph, but Baldwin saw something his overconfident enemies missed in their celebration. Each failed crusader charge pulled the Egyptian cavalry forward, eager for glory, scenting Christian blood. The Berber light horse edged past their protective infantry, breaking careful formation discipline. The Arab heavy cavalry, not to be outdone in claiming glory and plunder, began moving from reserve positions toward the developing massacre.
Shield wall, steady! Prepare to meet them!